Good afternoon and welcome to Solar Power Europe's webinar, Solar and Storage, the perfect solution for both rooftop and large-scale solar. This event will be held in two sessions. One will be the launch of our European market outlook for residential battery storage 2021 to 2025, where we look into the segment containing the lucky ones that were able to avoid rising power bills. And second, we will discuss when and why adding utility scale battery storage to solar PV makes financially sense as well. So, when we published our first edition of our residential battery storage report last year, the market was growing, what we found, but was very small in Europe. 1 year later, it has again grown quite a bit, actually much more than we expected. And we believe that the perspectives are even brighter, but it is still a comparatively small market. But that needs to change dramatically and soon. That's what we want to talk about today. In the foreword of our report, we chose the analogy of perfect partners, underlining that solar on the one hand, battery storage on the other, probably the greatest couple in the energy transition, as both of them are truly bringing out the best in each other. While solar on the one hand shows larger versatility and increasingly lower cost than any other power generation technology, battery energy storage systems, or abbreviated BESS, help to extend the reach of solar into periods when the sun doesn't shine, or just simply to make the energy system more flexible. So this affection is obviously true for all PV power applications, large scale and distributed solar, which we will deal with in today's webinar. But BESS is only growing more attractive for solar, as the steep learning curve of batteries has resulted, one, in cost levels which make the duo's economics more and more interesting to PV power generations. This is in particular true for residential solar in Europe, which is the scope of our report we're launching today. But it is also increasingly true for the large scale segment. So if you don't know it, I can only recommend to look also into the annual LCOE, LCOS reports from investment bank Lazard, which was the latest edition was just published recently. And that shows that utility solar and storage can beat gas peakers if, and that's the big if, the framework conditions are set correctly. That's the crucial point. And that's why this first 60-minute session has the following agenda. We start with my colleague Raffaele Rossi, Senior Policy Market Analyst at Solar Power Europe and also the coordinator of our storage work stream, who will provide an overview of the report results. Then I will discuss our policy recommendations with a representative of the Commission, Gonzalo Fernando Costa. He's a policy officer at the EC's DG Energy B4. B4 is the unit which looks into security of supply. And we have with us Thomas Herold, who's a technical director solar at world-leading solar inverter manufacturer Wuwei, which has in very recent times also become a leader in the residential battery storage solution field. Before I give the floor to Raffaele, I would like to express on behalf of Solar Power Europe our big thank you to our member Tesla, which sponsored an intern that helped us a lot to accomplish this market outlook. Raffaele, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Michael, and welcome also on my side. Really glad to be here today presenting our latest market intelligence report. And this new 5-year outlook from Solar Power Europe, as mentioned, looks how the market for residential battery storage systems has evolved in Europe and how it's going to look like in the next 5 years. This is the second edition of this type of report, which we started last year. So really glad to see this continuing, possibly also in the future. Now, not very differently from last year's key highlights, this new study is showing a very dynamic technology sector with large growth prospects. So we have looked into the historical growth across Europe and the key drivers around it, with a deep dive into the 4 largest markets. And then, as mentioned, we also looked at what lies ahead of us. And as we do for our other market intelligence reports, we carried out a 5-year forecast under 3 scenarios, which are based on the effect that different factors could have on the market, including, for example, prolonged impacts of COVID-19, but also the impacts of national recovery packages, the level of ambition towards renewable at EU level and also at national level in different European countries, as well the effectiveness of policy frameworks to support solar and storage. And as you can see, the report is available on our website, so you will get the slide deck with the link for your download. And before we start, let me also thank Tesla for sponsoring the report, and also big thanks to all the experts that contributed to the data collection, especially our member National Association and also our Perio members who contributed with their expert views. So let's delve into it. First of all, the rapid growth of solar PV system first and battery storage in more recent year has surely been supported by rapid and continued decrease of cost and prices, in addition to the incentive schemes that in certain countries have kickstarted some of the leading markets today. So as a result, these 2 technologies have become increasingly attractive to homeowners all across Europe. Importantly, let's look at Germany, which is the Europe's largest solar and storage market. And you can see from the left-hand graph that between 2016 and 2020, the prices have fallen by 11% for small PV and 24% for residential storage solution. Now, there's been a rise in prices taking place in 2021 due to post-lockdown global trade and economic condition, but we also expect a decrease in trend in the price of both applications as supply chains adapt to new trade conditions. The reduction in solar and storage prices is also important because it widens the spread between the retail power prices. Retail electricity prices have been increasing across Europe, and especially these days when the continent is already experiencing skyrocketing power prices due to the volatility of fossil gas prices throughout the winter especially. So the spread is increasing, and essentially this makes energy solution more appealing, even though national support schemes for pure residential solar systems in Europe are rather being phased out, at least generally. So while power from solar PV system has already been much cheaper than retail electricity in most European markets for several years, now thanks to this rapid cost improvements, also batteries are enabling solar and storage to beat grid power in an increasing number of European countries. And you can see in the right graph that in Germany, which is best in class market, the solar and storage system cost reached the LCOEs of 12 euro cents per kilowatt hours last year, which is nearly a third of the typical electricity price. Then, as said, component prices have gone up in the last month, resulting in temporary increase of LCOEs of both standalone solar and storage together. However, as the component price crisis is addressed, the downward path in the cost is expected to continue from the second half of next year. And by contract, electricity prices are expected to remain high, at least in the medium term. Now, in the first edition of the European Market Outlook for batteries at residential level last year, the analysis showed a rapidly growing home storage market across the European continent. And in 19, we analyzed that Europe had installed 747 megawatt hours of new residential storage capacity. with a 58% annual increase from the previous year. Now, this strong growth path has continued in 2020 with a 44% year-on-year increase in annual installed capacity. And for the first time, the European residential battery market has reached the landmark gigawatt-hour scale, totaling 1,072 megawatt-hours of storage capacity installed. This is equivalent to about 140,000 units installed in 2020 compared to less than 100,000 in 2019. So the market performance in 2020 contains actually two landmark numbers. So not only the gigawatt-hour scale for the first time, but also over 100,000 systems installed in one single year. And looking at the market just a few years back, we can see a completely different picture. For example, in 2015, so only 5 years before these milestones were reached, less than 18,000 home battery systems had been installed, with a total of 190 megawatt hours. So back then, the residential solar PV market was rather struggling to gain pace, and poor investment conditions made solar and storage attractive only to a limited number of households. So it's striking really to see how the market has grown 8 times from 5 years ago. If the increase in the annual market has been very steep, the growth in cumulative installed storage capacity is even more pronounced. And the residential fleet has jumped from less than 2 gigawatt hours in 2019 to over 3 gigawatts in 2020, with a 54% year-on-year increase. And this high growth in cumulative capacity gives an even better perspective of the speed of adoption of storage technologies that are still a rather novel thing in the European landscape. Total storage capacity has grown 14 times its size compared to just 5 years ago. And when we take residential battery storage into perspective with its solar companion, this accounted for approximately 8% of total residential PV systems in operation in Europe. So even though the attachment rate is rising, the untapped market potential for batteries remain huge, especially when taking into account that more than 90% of European buildings are still without solar systems. Let's look at the top 5 markets. So first of all, although more and more national markets are looking at solar and storage as a means to decrease dependency from volatile electricity prices and make better use of self-produced energy, the deployment of the technology is still largely driven by a handful of leading countries. So like last year, and actually even more so, Germany remains the leading European country in installations of both residential solar PV and, as you can see from the graph, of residential battery storage systems. In 2020, a new capacity of about 750 megawatt hours were installed, equivalent to more or less 19,000 battery units. You can clearly see from the chart that the central role of Germany in this transition cannot really be underestimated. So not only is the country currently providing the great majority of total European capacity with a 70% share, but its predominance, it's even growing up 2% absolute compared to last year's report. The annual installed capacity in Germany is higher than total European installed capacity just 1 year before. So besides Germany, and in a different order of magnitude, we have a few other markets that actually deserve our attention. Italy is the number 2, so retained and consolidated the number 2 position, thanks primarily to a strong public support scheme. In 2020, additional capacity of 94 megawatt hours were installed in the country, which corresponds to a 46% growth in comparison to the previous year. So very strong growth as well, though, as mentioned, leave a different level of magnitude. The Italian residential system market has been driven and continues to be driven thanks to the appealing subsidy schemes. In addition to the already existing tax credit for small-scale PV and residential batteries, there's a new fiscal incentives that was introduced. This was called the super bonus, 110%, and was introduced as part of the COVID-19 National Recovery Program. Essentially, this tax credit allows homeowners to deduct up to 110% of the expenses related to home energy efficiency work, including also PV and battery storage system installations. At the third place, we find the United Kingdom, which is also experiencing notable growth, but without any help of subsidies. We have a storage capacity of 81 megawatt hours commissioned in 2020 across the country, which results in a 25% increase year by year. The UK market still remains limited by the small volume of residential PV capacity installed, which is a segment that is still suffering from drastic reduction of the feed-in tariffs in the UK rooftop solar program, which fully closed in 2019. So essentially now both residential solar and storage rely on free market forces. What is interesting in this market, however, is that with the introduction of the Smart Export Guarantee in 2020, the prosumers now are offered specific tariff structures by energy retailers to reward the export of renewable electricity to the grid, which provides an incentive to adopt battery storage solutions. The profitability of solar and storage system therefore depends entirely on the individual energy retailer offer. And then just to complete the top 5, Austria and Switzerland are also included in this group, mainly thanks to their supportive policy frameworks for solar and storage, with annual additions of 41 megawatt hours and 26 megawatt hours, respectively. So in total, the top 5 European residential storage markets were responsible for more than 90% of the 2020 installed capacity across Europe. And in all other European countries, the residential battery market remains at an early stage of development, or even is not really existent as of today. All the rest of Europe, so outside the top 5, added 81 megawatt hours in 2020, which is 25% growth compared to the previous year, but still is as much as the additions of the third largest market, the UK. Some countries with a largely growing residential solar segment are still struggling to upscale their home storage market. And there are different reasons in each case. For example, in France, the main barrier remains the low retail electricity price, which is about 1/3 lower than the one in Germany. Whereas in countries such as Netherlands and Belgium, which also have a larger residential solar PV market, net metering schemes are the main disincentive for battery storage uptake. However, both these markets are transitioning out of their net metering scheme. So in the medium term, we expect these things to improve quite a lot. And other large rooftop PV markets such as Sweden or Spain have started to appear in the battery storage map and are expected to play a more prominent role in the future as the rate of installations grows. Let's look at the outlook now. So after last year, we left with sustained growth despite the COVID-19 pandemic, and actually against more pessimistic initial expectations, we expect the European battery market to maintain its upward path, as many European countries are seeing the first tangible results of recovery packages and other measures that have been put in place to recover their economies. After the European residential market for storage has surpassed the gigawatt level last year with 1.1 gigawatts installed, our medium scenario now is expecting 1.37 gigawatt hours to be installed in 2021, which is up 28% from 2020 levels. We have revised significantly upward our growth expectations, primarily due to the improved market conditions in Germany and Italy. In our market, in our medium scenario forecast, which in our analysis is the most likely development to occur, there will be annual 2-digit growth every year between 2021 and 2025, so throughout our analysis. In 2025, we expect 2.51 gigawatts of annually installed residential storage capacity across Europe. As a result of this improved market condition, we also revised upwards the low scenario quite significantly. This low scenario represents worsened trade conditions, new COVID-related restrictions, and other negative impacts, such as higher component prices, for example. And this anticipates a stagnating market in 2021 with 1.09 gigawatts of storage capacity installed. But on the other hand, the high scenario, which rather looks at a more positive outlook for the future, given policy and market developments, anticipates improved policy frameworks and other positive effects on the market, and leads to 1.82 gigawatt hours of installed capacity already taking place in 2021. Both scenarios are rather unlikely at this point in time, but we have been surprised positively by solar and by storage in recent years, so things could actually go better than we anticipate. By 2025, the European solar and storage market could be as small as 1.74 gigawatts or as large as 3.53 gigawatt hours, depending to the low and high scenario. And to complete the picture, looking at the total installed residential battery storage capacities, our outlook shows very high growth rates over the coming years. As a market segment that is still in an early growth phase, last year 54% growth will be followed by a 45% increase in 2021. In our medium scenario, we expect the cumulative residential storage capacity installed across Europe to reach 4.4 gigawatt hours in 2021, and annual growth to reach 12.8 gigawatt hours in 2025. And the associated growth rates are consistently above 20% for all the years within the scope. Under optimal conditions, so in our high scenario, residential prosumers could operate a battery fleet as large as 14.6 gigawatt hours by the end of 2025, compared to about 10 in the low scenario. And in terms of local developments, over the next year, Germany will continue to be the undisputed leader in the field of residential energy storage. There, the market is expected to follow the development of the residential solar PV installations, which are forecast to grow steadily in the 5 years we analyzed. So thanks to an attachment rate of 60% between batteries and rooftop solar, the number of storage systems installed will also grow considerably. But in addition to this, we also expect an increasing number of batteries installed as a retrofit to those PV systems that are phasing out of the 20-year feed-in tariffs that were introduced in 2000 onwards. And overall, we signal that this potential is huge, considering that only 20% of all residential PV systems in Germany are equipped with a battery. In our medium scenario, we see about 6 gigawatt hours of residential storage capacity to be installed between 2021 and 2025. At the second position, we will continue to see Italy, where the home storage market looks very promising for the coming years as well. The super bonus 110% will continue to drive the market forward as it has been extended until 2023. Italy is also somewhat lagging behind on the trajectory towards the 2030 solar target, and we expect the residential solar market to continue growing even when the fiscal incentive is over. For the United Kingdom, we also expect to remain at the top 3 in the additions between 2021 and 2025. In the country, residential PV is growing slightly after the stagnation caused by the feed-in tariffs cancellation in 2019. But residential batteries will follow a similar trend, supported by the further market liberalization and the possibility for electricity retailers to offer innovative network tariff structures. Then, despite being a much smaller country than the others in the chart, Austria will also remain in the top 5. And the drivers for this market are favorable government policies primarily. So a strong national solar target with a focus on rooftop solar and support schemes, including upfront investment subsidies, at least until 2023. And interestingly, the last country joining this group is France, which is taking a position away from Switzerland. Solar energy in the country there is poised to grow significantly in the period we observed, thanks to improved policy conditions. And despite the low electricity prices that are still posing a barrier to strong storage uptake, we expect about 170, 180 megawatt hours of battery capacity to be installed. What's also interesting is that the top 4 countries will more or less retain the relative shares in the European market in 2025, whereas the installation capacities in absolute terms clearly will keep growing. Germany will grow from 70 to 71%, while the other top 3 will lose 1 or 2 point percentages each. But as a result, the contribution from the rest of European countries will also increase, showing the beginning, at least, of a diversification trend that could be more pronounced in the longer term. And actually, thanks to decreasing technology cost of batteries and supportive national policy incentives, many private prosumers in other emerging European markets, such as Spain, Ireland, Czech Republic, and Sweden, will also be more attracted by PV and battery systems. So to conclude my presentation, I think the key takeaways are, well, first of all, that the strong path of home storage batteries across Europe has continued in 2020 with a strong over 40% yearly increase of newly installed capacity, and with over 1 gigawatt hour installed in 1 year. The market has passed this landmark, and also the landmark of 100,000 units installed in the first time. If the annual capacity has grown steeply, the increase of cumulative capacity has even been more pronounced. The residential fleet has increased from less than 2 gigawatt hours to over 3 gigawatts in 2020, with a 54% yearly increase. Although more and more national markets are looking at solar and storage as a means to decrease dependency from volatile electricity prices and make better use of self-consumed energy, the deployment of the technology is still largely driven by a handful of leading countries, primarily Germany. There isn't one single reason for storage to take off in different countries, and actually our analysis shows that different markets have been driven by different factors, such as the high spread between solar and storage costs in Germany, generous subsidy schemes in Italy and Austria, or the market liberalization with innovative network tariff structures in the UK. So all in all, we expect 1.35 gigawatt hours of home storage in 2021 and 2.51 gigawatts by 2025. Whereas in the medium scenario, we also expect cumulative residential storage capacity to reach 4.4 gigawatt hours this current year and 12.8 gigawatt hours in 2025, with annual growth rates constantly over 20%. So that would be my presentation. I'll now give back the floor to Michael for the panel discussion. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Raffaele, for the nice overview. Okay, hello Gonzalo, hello Thomas, great to have you with us today. For those who joined us later, this panel will discuss the opportunities and challenges of residential battery storage in Europe along our 4 main policy recommendations, which we have published in the report. And for that reason, we have with us Thomas Herold from leading inverter and storage manufacturer Wuwei, and Gonzalo Fernandez Costa from the European Commission's DG Energy. And there he works for a unit which looks at energy supplies, energy security of energy supply. So let's start maybe with our first ask. So the ask was actually, Raffaele, maybe you can show it here. You always put a slide in the background. Is acknowledge the paramount role of battery storage in the energy transition. So as Raffaele already has shown, we believe, and it's not only us, that electricity storage is a crucial component for the transition towards climate neutral European Union by 2050, where high penetration of flexible renewable energy sources like wind and solar need to be complemented by flexibility solutions that provide uninterrupted energy supply, no matter if it's night or if it's winter. And among those storage technologies, batteries are key. So we've published last year a report together with LUT University from Finland, where we modeled a 100% renewable energy scenario for Europe. And there we found out that distributed battery capacity needs to grow dramatically from the level installed today and reach 1,600 gigawatt hours by 2050. Just so we are at 3 gigawatt hours of residential solar today, as Rafaela has just shown. And even in case you're not looking for a 100% renewable energy scenario, the EC's models are different. In order to achieve a high penetration of renewables, simply we need an appropriate recognition of the role of batteries and together with a review of technical and cost developments of storage technologies. And this needs to simply be reflected in EU long-term planning and energy system modeling. And that's why we simply ask national policymakers that they have to recognize this huge potential and give more prominence to distributed storage in the revision of their national energy and climate plans, short NECPs. To Gonzalo, so what's the role of storage in the Green Deal towards a carbonized EU, and what's the part of battery storage in particular?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Michael, thanks, Rafael, for the invitation and for this very good presentation of this interesting study. I'm Gonzalo Fernandez Costa from DG Energy in the European Commission, and I come from Unit B4, Security of Supply and Safety, and we look very much into storage because we consider storage a key element for flexibility and the technology that could provide this flexibility that will require for the future energy system. But as you know very well, the Commission and the EU has a very strong commitment to be climate neutral for 2050. And this has been set in the European Green Deal, but also in the European Climate Law that has put into this political commitment into a legal obligation to have the 55% of emission reduction for 2030. In this context, electrification will be a key element of the economy. And nowadays, however, the electricity system accounts for 75% of these greenhouse gas emissions. And for 2030, we will need to increase this electrification, and the renewables in the electricity system will reach up to 65%. So in this context of high electrification, high renewables, the storage, the flexibility in general and the storage could play a very important role. We see that storage could facilitate this electrification and the integration of renewables, and also is a key element for this flexibility and therefore the security of supply of the energy system. And also, as we have now facing, it is also a relevant technology for lowering electricity prices when during peak times, as this was highlighted in the recent communication tackling rising energy prices. So we see storage in any case a market-based activity, and there are many technologies that compete each other, as well as they compete with other flexibility tools like flexible generation or demand response. But the relevance of storage is highlighted in several EU proposals and actions, and also by the Parliament with the resolution on energy storage. In particular, batteries, we consider it a very relevant technology, and as you has highlighted in this study, it is of increasing relevance and one of the main technologies developing nowadays, and we are paying a lot of attention to that. In particular, regards research and innovation. For example, in Horizon Europe and with the batteries partnership, there is a lot of efforts put into developing a supply chain for batteries in the EU, and to increase the importance, the innovation for this kind of technology that we consider very relevant.
Maybe one quick follow-up. So in the NECPs, I think, I don't know if I read all of them fully or if I remember, but I think I hardly remember batteries being mentioned, or residential battery storage. So how can we change that? They have to be revised. I think it's for solar, all the targets have to be lifted anyway. They are also way too conservative. What can be done there?
I haven't gone through all the NECPs, but some, if I don't recall wrongly, some member states has included the storage as important element in their NECPs. And in any case, what it has been identified is storage as a reform and investment priority for the recovery resilience plans, and therefore they are considered, they could be eligible for the recovery and resilience facility. So this depends and relies on the national entities and member states, but I think, and I would say that many member states already pay attention to this, and they are progressively including them storage and other flexibility tools in their plans, and taking this into account in the future energy systems.
Okay, we hope so and help them from our side. Thomas, Huawei started with inverters in the solar segment, where it is a global leader today. What role does battery storage play in Huawei's solar strategy?
Yes, so hello from my side as well. As you mentioned, so Huawei, I think we now keep the 5 years in a row global leading position in supplying inverters for solar systems. And as we are a global company, of course, battery storage combined with a solar system is one of the top priorities in our future strategy. Not only today, when we now entering the residential market in several European countries, but we already, as a company, Digital Power, so we are Huawei Digital Power, and we are supplying not only solar systems with our battery solution. This is as well combined with data center facilities, communication, UPS systems. So everything where is a very high importance on providing energy, a battery is combined. And of course, this is as well valid for the future solar system. And this is why this is one of the most important topics in Huawei in the production roadmap and in the development roadmap in Huawei.
Mm-hmm. So I think you've ramped up really your battery storage capacities very rapidly. So are we prepared for the needs of the solar industry for battery storage? Because if I look at today, okay, it's a special situation. I think we have material shortages everywhere, but especially in batteries, I believe the market could be also much larger if there were more battery cells systems available, right?
Yes, that's correct. But we are not starting from the scratch. This is why I meant we are Huawei Digital Energy, though we are not only focused on the solar systems, and our storage products are already used since several years. We provided more than 5 gigawatt hours on lithium ion batteries already in different scenarios, in different products, and that's why I think we are quite good prepared for now. But of course, new technologies and new industries as well are making more challenge in our supply chain. At the moment, we see a very strong demand in the car manufacturing, though EV, electric vehicles, who are as well have a big demand on the cell supply. But generally speaking, for today, we are in a quite good position. And during the last years, many other companies as well ramped up their position and their production capabilities. And if we look in future markets, they are not popping up surprisingly, though I think we will have a look, a very detailed look in the demands of the different markets. We heard already several countries in Europe where we are looking into for a future market, and I think we will prepare it when the markets are prepared.
Okay, that's good news. Our second policy ask was about to establish enabling frameworks for prosumers and self-consumption in member states in according with EU legislations. So the EU clean energy package already provides many very helpful provisions to remove barriers to a Europe-wide storage rollout. And that's beyond the handful of pioneer markets Raffaele talked about. That's obviously for the entire EU 27 region. But unfortunately, it's as Raffaele also has shown, only a few EU member states have implemented these prosumer and self-consumption friendly guidelines into national legislations. Gonzalo, so what's your view on the progress and how can things be accelerated?
Thank you for the question. First of all, as you said, I would say that the clean energy package is the main milestone and very relevant piece of legislation that would help to this to accelerating the progress, and in particular the clean energy package sets for the first time the definition of energy storage, but is very consumer centered and no discriminatory participation of technologies in the electricity markets. Therefore, there is the key element for facilitating flexibility services in a level playing field with other energy sources, and it also promotes aggregation, dynamic prices, smart metering, or the storage for active consumers. Therefore, the implementation of the clean energy package should remain a priority and should be duly taken into account. And this will, of course, help the facilitating the framework of this. I would say also that the electric vehicles are a driver for batteries in general, and also will help prosumers and more active consumers be involved in the managing their energy systems. On top of that, I also would like to say that the electricity regulation also lists several areas of new work for network codes and guidelines, and the Commission has identified in the priority list a network code for distributed flexibility. And I think this will also be a very relevant piece of legislation that will try to facilitate and create a framework for the development of flexibility, distributed flexibility in the EU.
Okay. So Thomas, what are the biggest hurdles you are seeing for product sales in EU markets today? So especially in the non-developed battery storage markets, but even if you look at the market of Germany, is it just like selling bread, or how do you approach even the more advanced markets?
Would be great if it would be so easy, right? I think you can generally speaking, from a consumer or installer and end user view. Things in several markets, maybe not in Italy, but in other at the moment, but in other countries, things are too complex. I recently traveled to Switzerland and learned how complex it is in Switzerland to get all regulative paperwork done before you are able to install a solar plus energy storage system. And the complexity in other growing markets are similar, though from a system operator view, it should be much easier to get the smaller residential systems set up and installed, and as well the paperwork done, because the most complex work for the installation people are most of the times the paperwork. And to understand all paperwork, what needs to be done from an end customer perspective, is as well a big hurdle for acceptance of solar systems. So from my product selling view, if we would make it much easier for everyone, for installer and for end user, the consumer, we could push much more energy storage sales and solar sales for the future.
So the magic word is again permitting, which is also very high on our agenda to make it easier. When you're active in all these markets, would you like to see more subsidies for solar, or would you prefer to have less? I think in Germany, for example, the KfW subsidy at some point ran out, so you have still some local subsidies. I believe in Bavaria they pay a little bit, and I think other states as well. But in Italy, where you of course now have this big rush, it's mostly subsidy driven, and also Switzerland, Austria have subsidies. So would you like to see more subsidies, and especially or rather less?
So what solar business should have learned from the past is that a very high push and demand driven by a very high subsidy is not a very healthful growth. And from my personal view, of course, it would be better for everyone if we can install more solar panels. We all want to reduce the carbon production, though we want to achieve our carbon targets. And one mechanism to achieve such targets is the subsidy. But from my personal view, we should have a look and make it on a very sustainable way, as well, free of complexity. What we learned here in Germany after the KfW subsidy, we had, I don't know, 20 different subsidies in each region. You can get one of the city, one of the government, one of the country, one of the, and it makes things much more complex. And as well, we can reduce a lot of complexity here. But of course, yes, it's one mechanism to achieve our targets.
And we have to see simply, also even in Germany, where we have the highest electricity prices in Europe, in the beginning, it was obviously the KfW subsidy, which got the market growing. So probably we will need it, at least for these new markets. And in Eastern Europe, retail electricity prices are much lower. So for Gonzalo, unlocking the storage potential of EU buildings will be crucial also to ensure the achievement of the Fit for 55 package. In this regard, the upcoming revision of the energy performance of buildings directive must really also ensure that the EU's renovation wave drives up the uptake of on-site solar and storage. So what can we expect here?
Well, I can't tell you much on this, but what I can highlight are maybe some initiatives and proposals that we have been developing in the EU and from the Commission that I think are supporting storage and that could help developing storage. Because as I said, it is we consider it very relevant, and the recent communication energy prices highlights this relevance. So the use takes and knows very well the importance of energy storage, and we try to support it. I come from DG Ener, and we are very much focused on the system integration of renewables and how it supports the flexibility. But of course, this is a very cross-cutting topic and affects many other DGs and many other fields of work. So storage is relevant from the point of view of system integration and hydrogen in the strategies there, and also for buildings, electric vehicles, or the second life of batteries. Nowadays is of increasing relevance the supply chains for batteries, and of course we are also paying a lot of attention research and innovation. But it is also an important field of work, the part of taxonomy and taxation for storage, and how the public funds can support the storage. So we are looking into storage in a very cross-cutting way, and this was very well reflected in the Fit for 55 package, where there are several initiatives in the Renewables Directive, in the Energy Efficiency Directive, or the Energy Taxation Directive. There are references for energy storage and important actions to try to develop this technology. So for the building, how it will be included in the upcoming document, I don't really know the details, but I can reassure you that this is an important element to take into account and to pay attention.
Okay, so our third ask is basically to develop a future-proof EU battery regulation. So, of course, like residential solar, market for battery storage will continue its upward path. The question is, the crucial question is how fast it will grow. And in this regard, it's also that's what we consider it's of utmost importance that the upcoming EU battery regulation does not burden storage technology manufacturers and investors. So we would need appropriate regulations for improved sustainability and safety performance of batteries. This includes then carbon footprint, recycled content, for example, or also performance and durability. However, what we as an industry need is that the battery framework must avoid any distortive market effects. Gonzalo, so what do you expect from the forthcoming trialogue negotiations regarding the EU battery regulation?
You know very well this proposal that was proposed by the Commission in December 2020. This regulation aims to ensure that the batteries placed in the EU market are sustainable and safe through their entire life cycle. And this includes some harmonizing requirements, minimizing environmental impact, encouraging recycling, reuse, and repurposing. That I would say this is very relevant for the energy sector. And as regards the legislative procedure, as you know, it is an ongoing process, and now the co-legislators are working towards the final text. And from the council, just the working party on the environment will take care, and in the parliament will be the environment, public health and food safety ENVI committee. But of course, there is also the internal market and the industry research and energy associated and other committees that will provide opinion. But the final vote of the parliament will be foreseen for January 2022. So we will start seeing the results soon.
Okay, thanks. Maybe to Thomas, so how does Wuwei look at topics such as carbon footprint, recycling, performance, and durability in your inverter battery products.
So maybe a quick word to the battery law and battery regulations. I think from my German perspective, as I'm working in Germany, and due to the more or less matured market on the storage product, we have quite clear regulations already set up. I think we are now in a transition period in regards to the new battery law, what was launched, I think this year, start of this year, and will be as well introduced January 1st next year, I guess. So we are watching quite very close what are new regulation, how can we match this regulation, and we will as well put this information and focus in our product development. There is where everything is beginning. Like for the energy storage product, choosing the right chemistry for the lithium-ion cell. You can already start there to set up a sustainable product. Building this in the product development roadmap. And this is a way how we work to comply as well with our internal strategy to set everything up for a carbon neutral future.
Okay, thanks. So maybe let's come, we just have a few minutes left to the final point of our policy asks, and this is about better integrate distributed energy resource potential throughout all phases of grid planning, because obviously we don't want the battery to go off grid, but to reinforce the grid and play out actually many of the benefits solar has and can and then better can serve the grid with the help of batteries. So power grids, in particular on the distribution level, we all know that, and it's getting really pressing, need to be reinforced and modernized in order to accommodate the uptake of solar and storage, to simply better value the flexibility potential we bring in here. So what role does battery storage play in the Commission's view in the context of grid modernization and expansion, Gonzalo?
Okay, I would say that for this, there are three main points that maybe we should take into account when thinking about modernizing and expansion of the grid. And these points were highlighted in a study that we commissioned last year. This study takes into account energy storage as an element for security of supply. The study includes an overview of technologies and some kind of the flexibility need for 2030 and 2050, but also address and identify some barriers for the development of energy storage. And in this study, they pay attention to the interaction with the grid and the grid planning. And I would like to highlight three points. One is the ancillary and grid management services, which are very important, the revenue stream for storage. The second one will be tariff and charges design for the grid and for the network. And then the third one will be how storage could compete with the traditional grid development and therefore with this grid planning. This will be mainly how instead of upgrading or building new network, just putting storage somehow to create a new line or to facilitate peak demand in some periods. So these are elements that we are taking into account and we are paying attention. And of course, we still have a lot of things to think about, and we will work on this to see how can we to find maybe key actions from the EU that can support the development of storage.
Okay, thanks, Gonzalo. So Thomas, you said your unit is called a digital unit in the end. So and Huawei has really a lot of leadership in digitalization and also a lot of experience in communication networks. So how does Huawei look at storage on the one hand and electricity networks?
Yeah. As Gonzalo already mentioned, though is more or less combined to each other. We already see storage services who are used from the grids, and this will be even more important for the future as we all hope renewable energy will be more and more move away or shift away the coal energy in the grids. So of course we need to look into options for our products, options for our inverters combined with storage systems to provide a grid forming product. So this is a great target for us as a Huawei. Not only digitalization, communication between the stations, let's say, between the plants, as well inside of the plant, communication between storage inverters to provide energy services to the grid as a grid forming solution to the grid. So this is our big target as a Huawei Digital Energy, and this is how and where we're working on.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot, Thomas. Thanks a lot, Gonzalo. Time's up and there's still a lot to do, or as we say in our reports forward, European countries better soon, need to create a happy ending for the most promising couple of the energy transition. It means by implementing the right policy frameworks in order to enable Europe to meet its climate targets for 2030 and beyond. Thanks again to Tesla for the support to create the report, to the panelists for the lively discussion, and to everyone on the screens for joining us. Report is for download on our website. We also just published a press release regarding these topics. So we have now a short break to have a coffee or AOB, and are looking forward to see you back in 30 minutes for the second part of this webinar, then on large-scale solar and storage. Thanks again, and have a nice afternoon and evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.